All right, I am back with another Common Sense conversation on the Common Sense Show. My guest today is Susan Owen. Do not call her Owens, please. There's no S at the end of her name. And today we're talking about her company, Millenia3. They do a very interesting thing in the media. I'm going to let her describe exactly what she does, who her clients are, how she's grown her company, what her future plans are. We're going to dig into a little bit of the nuts and bolts about what she does. And I'm excited for this conversation. She is revolutionizing media and media traffic. So without further ado, let's bring Susan in. Susan, welcome to the Common Sense Show.
Thanks for having me, Micah.
Yeah, no worries. So, before we get started, why don't you just introduce yourself and your firm and let us know what you do?
Sure. So I'm Susan Owen. Owen, singular, just the one. Like you said, I'm the president and CEO of Millenia3. We're an advertising operations company. So our clients are taking care of the glamorous side of advertising, the creative and strategic side. And we are really supporters and advocates. We help them with a variety of primarily ops functions. So the nitty gritty work, that goes in behind the scenes into executing ad campaigns.
Excellent. So let's break this down simply for people who are watching. What are some of the things that you all operationalize or you guys execute on?
So our primary business has always been kind of like broadcast ad distribution, trafficking, and data and tracking. So the company was founded way back when, primarily serving broadcast networks that were promoting their original series. And so they were coming up with these massive multi-million-dollar ad campaigns to promote their new shows. But they needed help with distributing all of the assets for their campaigns across this wide array of media outlets. And that's where we stepped in to kind of fill a niche role. And so now we're doing that for all different kinds of advertisers. And we do it in broadcast space as well as in digital and other spaces as well today.
So what makes Millenia3 different in this space? What have you come up with in terms of an operational model for your firm that is different from other distribution operations elsewhere in the media space?
Yeah. So we've always been really a service-oriented company. And the space that we operate in is hyper-competitive. It always has been. It's evolved a lot over time. There are these big mega distribution companies where their whole business is just doing this. And then you have also a lot of times ad agencies internally absorb these functions. So for us, as kind of a small guy in a big pond, we've always differentiated ourselves through service and treating our clients' kind of campaigns as if they were our own. Mm-hmm. So I always think about back in the days, the earlier days of commercial air travel. Mm-hmm. Before, like once upon a time, airfares were government regulated. So the airlines had to compete on their service, which is why when you see pictures of old, like of Pan Am and the airlines back in the 50s and 60s, everybody's in these like lounging, luxurious seats and, they're getting served like, hors d'oeuvres and cocktails and all this stuff. And it's this really glamorous.
Catch me if you can.
Exactly. Because they had to compete on service, know? So that's the kind of model that's worked for us, is to kind of level up the game. So rather than just kind of nickeling and diming our clients with these kind of commodities, we've been able to kind of really fold into their internal operations and kind of become an extension of them. Mm-hmm. So they kind of think of us as almost like an internal department and less as just like some other vendor, and that's served us well.
So what effort is involved in developing a distribution, several different distribution channels that you have? Because obviously it requires existing relationships on your part. I'm sure it seems like there's two functions that are at play when you're at, for Millenia3, which is you have to develop relationships with distributors and you have to develop relationships with your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're serving two essentially separate clients. And if the quality of what you're distributing is not good, you're going to have to deal with that on that end with the distributor because they're going to lose money. And if you don't find the distributors with whom you will distribute media, then your client's not going to be the ones generating it. So how do you split the baby?
Very delicately. No, you're absolutely right. You're right on. So we, it is, first of all, it's all about relationships, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
and that may be a thing in sales, and that may be a thing in individual industries. But for us, it's all of the above. In advertising, it's all about who you know. In business venture, it's all about who you know. In hiring and staffing, it's all about who you know. So that has always been something that has been a key priority for us, is building and maintaining relationships anywhere and everywhere, because just like that's how we're able to grow our business and bring in new clients, that's the same way that we're also able to do what you're talking about and have the right partnerships with the right vendors and peers so that we can provide the best services in the right situations.
Right.
So we are perpetually kind of surveying the landscape of, what the technologies are that are changing, who are the new players in the space, and always trying to create those new connections. So from a kind of business leadership perspective, networking and always meeting new folks and having new conversations is a huge part of that.
Yeah. So I want to get to the fact that media itself has evolved to something completely different than it was even maybe 8 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And so that's a question for a minute, but so you have these two clients that you have to serve, as we just spoke about. What are distributors looking for and good? Is it purely just about the content, or is it about the content of their specific demographic? Here's the thing, is that we all assume business owners may be watching this and looking at you for leadership. We make assumptions in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is that the things that we see on TV, the ads that go up, are way more sophisticated than we may think they are, because
Mm-hmm.
they seem like they pour money into this, millions of dollars, because they know exactly who they're going after.
Mm-hmm.
Is that always the case? Is that what you found, that they've been able to nail down their customer avatar, like really narrow?
Short answer is no. Short answer is it has always been the Holy Grail, and it continues to be the Holy Grail, to be able to say, I can find this exact consumer that is exactly perfect for my product. I can deliver the right message to them at the right moment, convert them into a sale, and I can observe that transaction so I know that it worked.
Mm.
That process, many call attribution, is still the Holy Grail. Now, because of our internet technology today and the amount of information that we as consumers have turned over through our behavior online, on mobile, on our connected devices, they have loads and loads of data about us. In fact, the more I learn, the more it kind of scares me sometimes. It's like,
yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And as folks like us that have been online for a long time, I think about, there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube now. I've already given away the farm. They know everything there is to know about me. Maybe my kids will be different.
Oh, I have a friend that's just like, I'm gonna hide this. I'm gonna turn this off. I'm like, it's too late. You've already used your phone. So not to digress, but like I'm a bit of a trial nerd, so I watch trials, and then it's funny
Okay.
because when you watch trials, you get to see all the stuff that the police and the law enforcement can do to like
Mhm.
track someone. They
Yeah.
know everything about how your fingers touch your phone and essentially how your fingers, what you're touching, how often you tend to charge your phone, what percentage of battery that you charge your phone at on a regular basis.
Mhm.
They know how many steps you go. I mean, the amount of information just in general about where you are. Like in order for you to get out of it, you have to go back to landline phones
Mhm.
and that's about it. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how you escape them learning everything about you because they're tracking you even when you don't know.
Yeah. No, it's exactly right. So because of that, because of what, they're able to collect about us, they know, advertisers know more now than they ever have about exactly where their audience is, what they're doing, um, and their habits and their likes and dislikes. So the data is stronger than it's ever been,
Mhm.
but and especially depending on kind of different types of products, depending what you're selling, um, there's still that final great challenge of connecting with the consumer in a way that's meaningful enough to them that they want to engage with your product. And that is still that's still the thing. That's
Right.
still that last, kind of chasm that advertisers have to overcome. And that's still there.
Yeah. And so how do you pick distributors? Like what's your framework for that?
Um, well, so our clients are running the gamut from consumer brands to, like I said, television and cable network streaming services. So
Mhm.
they have a wide array of different types of products that they're, selling and that the types of consumers that they're looking for. So for us, we are trying to make sure that we have as diverse an offering as we can so that we can provide really custom solutions to each
Mhm.
of our clients. Um, but the challenge there when you're a small business is, capital is, finite.
Mhm.
So you really have to try to get the most bang for your buck when you are entering into partnerships with, vendors or other partners, to think what is the most value that I can deliver to my client through this, knowing that my capital is finite. So we look for folks that we try to have, kind of minimal overlap in our partners so that, each one is kind of offering us some unique capabilities.
Right.
Um, and we also, there's a little part that's just kind of, that little spidey sense that you have after doing business with folks for a while where you can tell, like, I think these guys are going to do what they say they're going to do versus
Right.
the ones that you're like, this is just too slick on the outside,
Mhm.
and learning that discernment over time.
So I run a manufacturing firm, and part of that job is that we too have to look for distributors in our own way. And you're right, a lot of people who enjoy your product make a lot of promises to get your product in front of people and then do nothing with it. And that by committing to someone in a distribution channel that is over eager to have it because they enjoy it, but don't have the necessarily the client relationships to actually move it and
Mm-hmm.
actually make more money for the firm for the creator or for in our case a manufacturing firm. Like it takes an opportunity off the table, but at the same time it simultaneously affects your ability to impact your brand positively in the marketplace. And I mean, there really could be some tragic consequences to choosing the wrong partner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what's been the biggest? Have you ever had a situation where, for instance, you've had to say no to someone who you thought might be a good fit as a partner, um, and there was just something that was overriding the reasons why you should say yes?
Yeah, we've had a few different instances. So one actually that came just about a year ago was we were kind of flirting with this partner that like a lot of things were really clicking and a lot of things looked really good on paper, but we started to notice almost like kind of too much overlap in what we did and what they did, to the point that I started to wonder if we were just going to be helping them a lot more than they were helping us,
Yeah. Yep.
So I guess the takeaway from that is to kind of like know your value and own it,
Yeah.
and don't give it away for free.
Right.
Because, initially we were like, oh, look at these guys, they're bigger, they have more resources, they have, some real reach. But the more we kind of sat in conversations with them and saw how extremely curious they were about our business, the more I started to think, you know what, I think we have more value here than they kind of can return, or that they can, kind of bring to the table. So definitely have had, that was a, we'll keep in touch.
Yeah.
Kind of situation.
But it's funny that you say that, because I think that's actually a valuable lesson for people who are listening to the podcast, which is that often there are going to be times, for instance, when you're operating a company, and your company it's just you're bringing more to the table than what someone's given to you, and that is essentially, it can become a toxic relationship, because you end up resenting and regretting having that relationship, because you're kind of given 2 to 1, or $1.50 to 1 to the person that you bring in. Let's talk about the evolution of broadcasting. How has broadcasting over time affected what you do? The change in broadcasting affected.
Yeah. No, this is one of my favorite topics, because it's just, as a consumer, having, just generationally kind of come up in one world and now be living in this completely different world. It's really kind of just fascinating. So, and I'm a bit of a legacy. My parents were both in broadcasting.
Oh, cool.
They both worked for TV and radio stations, and they served different roles. My father started as a journalist, and then he went on to manage stations. And my mom actually worked in programming, and so so I kind of grew up with these very old school minds around me, and one of my first mentors in business was also, which you could kind of consider old school broadcasting.
Right.
But around the time that I was starting my career is really when it was already starting. Things were starting to really change as far as how consumers interacted with what we now call content. Back then it was just like shows, now it's content. And I remember being working at a cable network in, I don't know, maybe 2006. And I had my first TiVo then.
Oh, wow. I remember TiVo. Oh my gosh.
I can still hear the sound effects in my mind. I don't know if you do too. That little clicking bubble sound that it has.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I do.
And I was working for this network, and network, it's all about ad sales. It's how they make their money, is ad sales. And I was like talking to my then mentor and being like, I can fast forward through commercials. This is crazy. What is this going to do to our business? She was like, oh, it's a fad. It's a thing. And that was 15 years ago. And now you look at now, and it's like a completely different world that we live in, and what consumers expect as far as, the type of entertainment that they can view, how they view it, when and where they view it, on their own terms, whether or not there's ads present, all of this kind of stuff, all of this control has shifted to the consumer that used to not be there, which is great for consumers and the great conundrum for broadcasters.
Yeah. And so, okay, so right. So we're all whip out our phones. A lot of people consume content on their phones now, which is why everything is obviously mobile justified and, optimized for mobile. And you have these content creators like myself, for obviously on YouTube, doing this. And the content creation industry is going to be astronomical over the next 15 years, right? Because people like consuming content from experts, and the availability of people to distribute their own content now is like out of sight. I mean, you have YouTubers making, look at Mr. Beast. That guy, it would be a TV station of his own, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day. That's how much income that he brings in and kind of spits out and how much revenue he does. How do you bring value to that segment? Can you bring value to that segment, like in your business? How do you manage the expectations of legacy type institutions while this change is also happening?
Yeah, no, that is a fantastic question. And it's the question that as a business owner, that's the one that keeps me up at night
Mm,
is how are we able to evolve our services when when we were constructed to bring value in one environment and one marketplace, and now that thing has completely shifted. And not only has it shifted, but it keeps evolving,
mhm,
constantly, continuously. And so that question that we're forever researching and forever sitting in our leadership team brainstorms and talking about is how to continue to evolve and stay relevant, because advertisers are not going to go away. Consumer brands, consumer products are not going anywhere.
right.
And whether you are selling toothpaste, shaving cream, shoes, cars, siding on a home,
Mm,
the demand for those products is still going to be there. And so
right.
the need for advertisers to communicate their messaging is not going anywhere, but the channels have changed so much. So for us, we try not to think about necessarily like, well, what is the newest technology that we have to get? Or what is the newest service that we need to be able to provide? But rather think about what are the problems that they still face, and sometimes the problems evolve, and always try to just be the source that they can turn to solve those problems, because that's what our brand was built on,
Mhm,
was solving these headaches when it came to ops
right.
and advertisers being like, okay, we've got our creative, we've got our strategy, now how do we make it happen?
Mhm,
And we were there to help them solve that problem. So that's kind of the brand that we've built.
mhm.
So we try to just make sure as long as we continue to honor that brand,
Yep.
being a brand of problem solvers, of, taking away worry and, allowing, bringing peace of mind. If we can honor that brand promise, then any way that we can do that is kind of fair game for us to think about as additional new services, if that makes sense.
So what value do you bring to those companies now that this landscape has changed? Because let's drill down on that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
You talked about value, and you know, production in general, right? So like production, the cost of production is actually going down, not up.
Yes.
As the cost of iPhones raises slightly because it becomes more things with one device, the
Yes.
cost of production goes down. The fact that you can shoot a 4K TV show and even movie from your
Hmm.
iPhone, which has been
Hmm.
done and then edited, the fact that you can put on a live stream to a couple 100,000 people, um, the fact that all the things, right,
Hmm.
that made broadcast super expensive before,
Yeah.
um, are, as capitalism does what capitalism does, all these things inevitably become cheaper.
Hmm.
Um, and they become more concentric because people can start becoming economies of one or two or three because
Sure.
based off of what content they're putting out there. How do you stay in that fight?
That's a great question. And it's, I'm amused a little bit just thinking about some of the challenges of some of the big like studio companies and things that are still, you know, um, like a Netflix, for example, who at one point made a name for themselves by just blowing budgets out the door
Right.
to um, develop, kind of prestige video content. And now that expense is now that same thing that's challenging them as a business, because you have folks over here that are able to also produce really compelling content for dramatically lower prices.
That's right. House of Cards was like that show
That was,
that
yeah.
Netflix had that was like almost like the launching point for their whole internal the internal content creation team.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's so true. I think I saw a thing when some of the early creators were an early interview saying that they had maybe taken their pilot to a network, and the network had been like, this is great, just make a pilot. And then Netflix was like, this is great, why don't you make a whole season? And they were like,
Yeah.
that's what we're gonna do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So
So how do you guys
to answer your question.
how do you guys deal with that?
So, we try to go, like I said, kind of go where the pain points are.
Yep.
So when it comes to kind of, you're talking about digital content distribution, it's a whole new ball game. So instead of like, for example, the operational sides in some of those areas have streamlined a lot, and it's a lot simpler to execute a digital or social ad campaign than it is to execute a traditional linear broadcast campaign. So we have to look for opportunities to provide value in other places. So that's where we have gotten more into research and analytics and being able to say, okay, well, so the delivery and execution of this is a lot simpler. There's not as much work for us to do, and therefore not as much service for us to provide. But so how can we find data and analytics partners that can bring new value so that, so that the customer can see the impact that their work is having and where they can optimize their work and, make adjustments in a timely fashion. So we have to kind of think about things from some different perspectives now because their problems have changed.
Yeah.
And what once used to be this big beast to tackle, sometimes now is a lot simpler. So we still want to be the one who tackles it for them, but it's not as much of a profit center for us anymore. So that's where it comes into looking for new problems to solve and new partnerships to explore.
So let's talk about why that's really smart. And the reason why I believe so is all you have to do is take a look at Facebook's earnings. Facebook's earnings tanked basically over the last 18 months. And one of the reasons why is because when as government regulates how social media is able to advertise to their audience, and it requires them to strip away some attributes of advertising, it affects analytics and the ability to send that information back to whomever is advertising in that platform. And so this is one of the primary reasons why Facebook's earnings tanked, because they couldn't sell ads because the reach wasn't there. Yep. And people simply stopped advertising with them or reduced their advertising because they weren't able to direct their advertising dollars to where they wanted to go. And so the reason why I think it's such a smart play to play in the analytics firm is because those things are still, the analytics channel is because those things are still relevant to business owners, obviously, to in your case, broadcast media. Those things are really still relevant, and you have to get the information somehow. To have a firm that can provide marketing intelligence it's really important, because that ability is being stripped away every time there's a regulation passed that regulates social media, which is the new way to distribute content and advertising, etc. And so I think that your pivot to providing business intelligence it's a smart way to provide value, because business owners in big corporations are losing massive amounts of data that they, in some ways, that they would normally have or that they used to have. Now it's changed. Now you can say on your iPhone, do not track, right? And so that takes away a certain ability for apps to be able to understand certain demographic information that they have from from their ads. Like you can't put income information into Facebook anymore like you used to, which is a big one, which was a really important one, right? So I think that business intelligence is a really good way to actually, it's a little, for the firms like yours who provide that intelligence, it's a lot more boots on the ground work because you have to try to find other ways to kind of gather that data,
Mhm.
surveys, whatever, maybe some some qualitative data or qualitative research. But I think it's a smart way to do business given this state of how the pendulum was going to swing back to them reducing the amount of privacy or reach that these advertisers could ultimately have even
Mhm.
now. Is that what you're seeing? Some of the requests that these companies are looking for from you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a really, I mean, data and analytics is a really competitive space. A
Yeah.
lot of people have a lot of information that they're collecting from different sources. And so I think for us, part of it has been just kind of like, okay, know your assets, know your strengths, and don't try to be somebody that you're not. We are not a company that was built on data. We did
Mhm.
not found a proprietary technology or a unique data collection mechanism, and that's not what we built our business on. So while we have seen the demand for that with our clientele, and we've looked for opportunities to be a gateway to that intelligence for them, we also are trying to embrace, like, this is who we are, and you can't fake it. you know I think, like, so I've worked in big corporate environments in the past where I was in the marketing group and I was getting to be the client when all these research companies were coming in and saying, look at what we can prove to you. And I mean, the number of, like, platform dashboards with bar charts going up and down,
Right.
and this is what's happening with your money, and this is what's happening with your consumer, and it's like smoke and mirrors. I mean,
Mm,
when you've seen one, you've seen them all.
true.
Um,
Yeah.
it's, they can make it look really glossy, but it's not necessarily providing meaningful
Mm,
intelligence.
mm,
So that landscape is really, really competitive. So for us, it's been about really trying to kind of practice some, I don't want to say integrity, but some real kind of honesty with ourselves about, well, who are we and what are we good at? And why would we try to do something that is not innately who we are? And instead focus our resources on finding really fantastic partnerships
right.
and finding the other companies that we think like us are small but mighty,
Mhm.
that have really great services to
Yeah.
offer, really strong, compelling data, or
Mhm.
really strong, attribution models, and bringing our value to the table, which comes in our service and our relationships, our clientele, our reputation, and saying, let's bring those two worlds together.
Right.
So rather than us trying to be something we're not, finding really special partners, bringing them on board, and then coming to our clients with some unique solutions, that has worked for us.
You've worked with some large clients: TNT, Disney, ABC, TBS, BET, CNN, Hanes, Lacoste, Gillette, and I'm getting tired talking about all the big clients that you work with.
I
Many,
know,
many, many.
it's a good problem.
It is a good problem to have. What is it like to work with those larger clients? Do they? Yeah, I don't want to lead you in the question. This is not court. I don't want to lead you. I'm objecting to myself. What is it like to work with those clients?
Um, It's perfect for the right kind of service people, you
Mm,
know? They are a diverse bunch, and just as you can imagine, as many different types of corporate cultures that there are out there, that comes across in the clients that you work with. You have some that are super buttoned up and hyper organized, but they're inflexible. And then you have others that are kind of a mess, but you can teach them and guide them.
mm,
You have some that are very demanding, some that don't know, up from down. And so you really have to be super adaptable when you're a service oriented company. Not take that personally, not let that stress you out, and
mm.
instead really try to be a great listener and figure out how you can help them, because they don't all need the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. I can only imagine the spectrum of organization and planning that they have. But one thing I've noticed, especially recently, is that a lot of these bigger companies, with not should I say a lot? I should say a few probably are starting to think like really small companies, and to me, that's a great strategy to have in place. Which is okay, we're this Fortune 500 company, but we're thinking like a little firm, in Midwest Idaho, and trying to figure out how we can scale across the country. If they keep that kind of humility in their business operations, it tends to serve them better. And what has been the key to service? Well, you talked about that already, but what has been the key, in your opinion, to some of these bigger companies and like their thought process about the future and adaptations and like what they want to see in the partners that they work with?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because we've seen kind of real diverse, different sets of priorities. I mean, we have clients where, we see secretly behind their backs call them the bean counters, that are just completely compelled by the mission given to them by their CFO, and those can be tough cookies for us sometimes because as a small guy with limited resources, we're not always able to provide the dirt cheapest price, and we don't want to because we think we're more valuable than that. So so they have different philosophies, but we also have clients that are really more focused on culture and the kind of quality of life of their teams. And so we get to have totally different kinds of conversations with them, but they all kind of go through storms. That's what I've noticed is every client that we are working with today, they're all kind of in their own ways going through turbulent times. And sometimes those are because of financial shifts, changes in the industry, changes in their business. And sometimes they're cultural. Sometimes they are, advertising is an old business that has had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations. And it's a business that's very visible and on the cutting edge of conversations. So likewise, it goes through the tumult that cultural conversations go through.
Sure. Yeah. Talk about things changing over the time. You took over the business from your dad or both parents?
My dad.
Your dad.
Yeah.
And so what was it like? Because second generation businesses don't have great reputations, and in terms of their success rate. And so how have you been able to buck the trend with now being in charge of a second generation business, and stay in business?
It's been really tough. It's been really challenging. So the timing was a little inconvenient. My father was an incredibly devoted. He loved this company as much as he loved anything in the world. And we all kind of knew he was never going to retire. So fortunately, he never got to live out, get his beach house in St. Simon's that he wanted and spend his days on a pier fishing. So the transition was, somewhat sudden. And it was in May of 2020 is when things kind of changed. So the whole world was kind of in a moment of change and uncertainty. So the challenges that were going to hit our business anyway were happening, whether it had been him here or me here or somebody else. Challenges of, what happened economically during COVID and what has happened in our business, in our economy, ever since. So that has already created challenges for our business. Then you add in a change in leadership, and there have been some bumpy moments. So for me, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got early on in stepping into this role was to build a dream team. And that for me has meant asking lots and lots of questions, asking certainly questions twice as many times as I give my own opinion, and being a great listener for people that are experts in what they do. And that meant internally in the company, because I'd already been with the company for like 8 years. So I knew the business really well. I just didn't necessarily know business ownership. That's been the part, which is there's a lot to it, apparently. And so tapping our internal resources to learn all the things that I didn't know initially was huge. And then going out and finding all the wise minds to come in and help me learn all the things that I didn't know how to do. That was one of the biggest game changers. So, there was a lot I needed to learn about HR and about legal and about, employment law and like all these other things.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things has been kind of knowing what you don't know and asking for support. And as a result, we've gotten together some really incredible minds that have helped us really move the business in a new direction.
Awesome. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you about what the biggest learning lesson in terms that people could take away that you learned from, were able to overcome and implement. But before you answer that, I'm going to just give a little call to action here and thank everyone for watching, for tuning into the Common Sense Show. And I just want to remind you to sign up for our newsletter that comes out every single Monday, where I share exclusive tips and insights on how to take your business to the next level and move your business toward becoming an income-producing asset, because that's what we do here on the Common Sense Show. Plus, as a special bonus for my newsletter subscribers, I'm offering a free version of my business stress test that I use in my business coaching program. If you're ready to take your business to the new heights, head over to www.thecommonsensepodcast.com. That is www.thecommonsensepodcast.com, and sign up for my newsletter today. All right. So, Susan, the biggest mistake, your biggest learning lesson. I haven't got the mistake yet. I'm going to ask about that. I already gave you a preview by accident. But what's the biggest learning lesson that you've taken away so far?
Oh my gosh, there have been so many.
There's always a bunch.
There have been so many. Let's see. I think the most valuable lesson, I kind of alluded to it earlier or a moment ago, I think has just been, to me, probably one of the most valuable kind of values or principles that I've tried to practice through this process has been humility. Mm-hmm. Staying right-sized, not thinking I've got it when I don't, right. But also believing and trusting in the things that I do know and in my experience, mm-hmm. and striking that balance between the two. So it requires a lot of open-mindedness, listening to other people's ideas and being willing to, because I'm chatty. I'll talk your ear off. I love a collaborative brainstorm. Right. Give me a stack of Post-it notes and a marker and, we'll
go to town.
Nuts, go crazy. But really being a good listener and paying attention to the voices around me and not trying to lift it all on my own, mm-hmm. has both been something that has kept me from being totally overwhelmed by the process. And it's also been the thing that has opened the door to some really great ideas that I never would have found on my own.
So what you're saying is that the people watching this should subscribe to my business coaching program, because it's important to have mentors in your life that have built businesses successfully that you can learn from.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh, well, thank you.
It is so true. I think it's a beautiful act of humility to be able to seek advice from wise counsel.
So what's the biggest mistake that you've made since you've taken over? May 2022, you jump in. It's 2020, excuse me.
May 2020.
You jump in. Was it unexpected? You're taking over?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was unexpected, and now from 8 years in the role, what were you doing during the 8 years? I'm assuming that you had some leadership role.
I was kind of in a middle management position, running a small department. Yeah.
All right. And so now you're not running a department, you're running all departments. And you are the eagle looking over the landscape. So what was the biggest mistake that you've made?
I don't think I realized how much time takes. I had thought about taking on this job for a long time, and I was filled with ideas. Well, when I'm the king, And then when the opportunity was actually given to me, I realized that um, there's a lot of work to be done to move. I think of us sometimes as like this great ship,
Mhm.
like this giant vessel. And if
Yeah.
you want to make a hard left turn, you don't just spin the wheel and flip it around. It takes
Mhm.
work and persistence and a plan and the group working together, and meaningful change doesn't happen overnight, but it is possible. We've overcome some really big challenges. We had some culture problems. We
Yeah.
had some financial problems. We had, when I kind of started peeling back the layers of the onion,
Mhm.
I was, kind of horrified at some of the things I saw, because old leadership doing the things, an old way of doing things. And it's taken us some time to really get into our foundation and make sure that we're really doing things the right way.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would say it was a mistake. It was definitely a misconception that I had,
Mhm.
that we were just going to come in there and just start chopping off heads and just making things happen. But the truth was that it was going to take a lot of time, patience, perseverance, collaboration, teamwork
Mhm.
to do that. And if I were going to identify a specific mistake, it would probably be opening my mouth when I should have kept it shut.
Yeah, learning that level of discernment is certainly a time-tested skill that requires you opening your mouth and setting foot on a regular basis to try to
Well,
figure out.
I think it's a misconception about leadership that as a leader, you have to have all the answers. And I think I had that misconception when I came in that, okay, they're all going to be looking at me. They're going to expect me to have a perfect plan and know how to perfectly execute it. And that was not real. They actually didn't expect that of me. But I had to learn that lesson by kind of, um, saying a few more things than I really needed to say and realizing that it doesn't always work out to just
Mhm.
talk.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, really, it's about your ability to find the answers. I think you mentioned it earlier about seeking advice and counsel from people with whom have access to that. And it's okay to tell someone, "Well, I'll get back to you in a minute
That's right.
because I'm going to go and figure out what the answer is." And the leadership is about true leadership is about you you understanding that running a business is a process that requires you to attune yourself and your instincts to um, putting people in the right position. So, like, I think you said something earlier, which I thought was interesting, which was that you talked about cleaning house, right? And it's easy to clean house because all you have to do is say you're fired, and then they're fired. I mean, what else are they going to do? But it's much harder to understand that maybe you have a whole team that's in the wrong batting order,
Mm,
and maybe your designated hitter should be playing first base, and maybe your third baseman should be a shortstop.
mhm,
That's true leadership. Before you jump to the end of firing someone, um, then you need to kind of rearrange them. But you also need to realize who's a terrorist on your team and try to figure that piece out too. Like who is actually a detractor, right?
mhm,
Who would be addition by subtraction? And is there a commonality there? Someone ruining the culture, like to your point.
mhm,
Um, all those things are involved in leadership, and it's one of the things that we coach in my business coaching program. Basically, is like how to identify these things because people are inherently looking for reasons to help improve, themselves, which is fine. They should be, but like not at the cost of the company or themselves. And
mhm.
that can be a challenge when you see that happening in the business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What's the future of Millenia3?
Um, we're gonna go big or go home. I think that's how we think of it. We're in a really competitive landscape. We are in a place where technology, consumer behavior is evolving at the speed of light. And so, not everyone that shows up to the battlefield is victorious. That's
Mhm.
kind of how it is. But so for us, we've decided that we are going to, if we're going to burn out, we're going to burn out bright. We are not going
Mm.
to fade away. So,
I like that.
so the future for Millenia3 is, we have a small, beautiful, wonderful team. I'm so grateful we were able to get through the pandemic without having to eliminate any positions, and be able to keep this team strong and build even more trust and camaraderie. And now people are really bringing their A game to the table. So we are just gonna, keep fighting to do the best work we possibly can, and practice a little faith that the payoff is there for us. It has been so far.
That's awesome. It certainly sounds like you. I enjoyed a lot of what you said about how you problem solve now that you've taken over versus before. That just shows your growth as a leader. It shows that you understand that in order to take your company to the next level, you're going to need a team, and a good one, to do it. Nobody can do it all by themselves.
That's absolutely right. It's all about them at the end of the day. That's why we have to do this. We win together.
Yeah. How can people find you if they have, for instance, questions, if they want to become a client, if whatever the case is? Like how does someone get in touch with you? Maybe a woman who is opening a business and they want to just pick your brain. How should they do that?
Absolutely. So you could learn all about our company on Millenia3.com. Our contact form actually goes straight to the leadership team. It doesn't go into a marketing black hole. So you can always reach out that way. And I'm also on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile name is Susan IRL in real life. And reach out to me directly.
I had to Google what IRL meant like a couple years ago. I didn't realize what that meant. Yeah, I'm from a generation long ago, so that's why I had to.
We're all still learning. That's fine.
Yeah, that's right. Oh no, I have a rolling list of initialisms that they use on social media like Twitter that I have to try to define, try to figure out what it means.
Well, you probably also, like me, have lots of friends that have Gen Z kids that I'm perpetually needing some translations and some support. Yeah,
I have two of them. I have two teenagers, so there's that. So I just found out that IIRC means if I remember correctly, which I didn't realize.
See, I didn't know that. I wouldn't have known that one. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, IIRC. I've seen it, and I was like, "What is this? Is this another committee, government committee or something?" No, if I remember correctly, that's what that means. Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate it. Your story was inspiring, and how you've been able to lead, frankly, Millenia3 post, your dad being in that position with his challenges is heartening, especially for people looking in to see how they can actually become a leader to people who follow them. So I appreciate your story.
Well, I say we keep what we have by giving it away, So thanks for having me, Micah. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. All right, folks. That is Susan Owen. Don't call her Owen. All right. So that was a good conversation. I just finished with Susan Owen, and she is the president, the CEO of Millenia3, and she knows her stuff. The fact that she was able to take over the company from her dad, maybe get hit, of course, like a lot of us did during COVID, maintain her composure and her balance, and to keep the company moving and learning lessons is what entrepreneurship is all about. That's the name of the game. It's about learning from your mistakes, understanding how to correct them, and being able to move forward. Thank you for paying attention and listening to our conversation today. Until next time, don't forget, if you don't go to work on building your business, you're going to go to work on building the business of someone else. Until next time, I'm Micah.